you a question, and that is, what is in your life's blueprint? Number one in your life's blueprint should be a deep belief in your own dignity, your own worth, and your own somebodyness.
We were chosen as the most likely not to succeed from where we came from. But it all starts with you. Believe in yourself.
So whatever the mess is in your life, young people and old people, take that mess, push it away, and become the message.
For the only way that dreams come alive and things we care about find their way into the mainstream is when we in communities all across this great nation work to make our own community a better, safer, and more wonderful place to live.
Always feel that you count. Always feel that you have worth. And always feel that your life
we have always pushed forward, and after some of our darkest hours have come some of our biggest triumphs.
This city has a future, and its future is bright, and I know Detroit is going to come back stronger because you are resilient.
There's going to be ups and downs along the way. There's going to be bumps in the road. That's a part of it. But don't let that distract you. Don't let that keep you from your dream.
But if you don't want something better for yourself, there is nothing I can tell you to get you to that point. You have to want something better. You have to be your own best mentor. Nobody else is going to drag you there. You have to drag yourself.
All change is always done by the youth. And with all the turmoil that's going on in the world, I'm actually starting to see youth come out, and it makes me feel so good.
What do I see that the world needs for me to feel right in it? And then to think, I can fill that gap.
If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl, but by all means, keep moving.
Hello, and welcome to Wayne State University's 2022 tribute to the life and legacy of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Each year, we pause to reflect more deeply on Dr. King's inspiring words and impactful works. This annual signature event was the brainchild of the late Dr. Arthur L. Johnson, who served as a senior vice president at Wayne State and was a classmate of King's at Morehouse College. In his memoir, Race and Remembrance, Dr. Johnson stated, "I wanted to make sure that Wayne State's Martin Luther King Memorial Program would be first rate and attract not only students, but the community at large." We remain committed to maintaining Dr. Johnson's vision of an exceptional and community-embracing celebration of Dr. King's life and legacy. Due to health and safety concerns, we are hosting this year's tribute as a virtual event. However, we hope that you will enjoy the program just the same. Thank you for joining us today. Now, I would like to introduce to you the host of today's program, Mr. Greg Bowens. Greg is a Navy veteran who attended Morehouse College, as did Dr. King and Dr. Johnson. He received his BA in English from Wayne State University. He is also a trusted public figure who has built a successful career over the last 20 years in civil rights, journalism, public relations, political consulting, and public affairs. Greg is owner of Bowens & Company, and his work on the public stage continues to make a positive difference for people at every level. He provides leadership, organizing expertise, and media relations for his clients, and has played significant roles in 22 local, state, and federal campaigns. Greg has worked at many publications, including Business Week magazine, the Congressional Quarterly, and the Detroit News. He is a contributing columnist for Deadline Detroit and pens guest columns on topical issues in various news media outlets. He is often sought out by journalists from around the country and talk show hosts for his expertise on business, race, civil rights, politics, and social justice issues. I present to you the host of our 2022 tribute to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Greg Bowens.
Thank you, Patrick, for that wonderful welcome, and good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us as we honor the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This annual event is made possible by companies who represent Dr. King's crusade for fairness, equality, inclusion, and service. Our sponsors are Rocket Companies, DTE, Seal, Comcast, MGM Grand, Ford Motor Company, Queen Lillian Development, Walker Miller Energy Services, Siebert Williams Shank, Mechanical Contractors Association of Detroit, the Wayne State Alumni Association, AARP of Michigan, and the Youth Connection. Thank you to WDET for their media partnership, and a special hello to all of the students from the Detroit Public Schools Community District who are watching. We are pleased to have DPSCD as our education partner. The theme for today's program is Looking Back to Look Ahead. We will reflect on Dr. King's life and how it impacts our lives today. Our keynote speaker is Christopher Wilson, native Detroiter and Wayne State University graduate. He currently is the Director of Design Experience at the Smithsonian's National Museum. Starting us off in song is a finalist from the 2021 season of The Voice. We all know she should have won, but we're honored to have her here today. Please welcome Detroit's voice, Miss Zania Alake, as she sings Lift Every Voice and Sing and the Star Spangled Banner.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on our way, from the path of our God where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk from the wine of the world, we forget thee, shadowed beneath thy hand. May we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Lift every voice and sing. Let us march on till victory is won. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Zania. We look forward to hearing from you again later in the program. Now, each year, the President's Office fully supports this tribute to Dr. King. M. Roy Wilson is the 12th president of Wayne State University. Under his leadership, the university's graduation rate has steadily increased. It was the best in the country in 2018. Gains were especially pronounced among first-generation, lower-income, and minority students. Dr. King said, and I quote, "Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education," unquote. President Wilson endeavors every day to ensure the students at Wayne State University not only receive an excellent education, but develop character that represents integrity, inclusion, and respect.
Good morning. I'm M. Roy Wilson, president of Wayne State University, and it's my privilege to welcome you to today's program commemorating the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. More than 9 decades ago, a man was born in the American South who would forever change our country. He shared with us his dream of a nation where blacks and whites stood united with equal treatment under the law. When many were fueled by hate, the Reverend Dr. King spoke of brotherly love. When many turned to violence, he stood in peaceful protest. His speeches inspired the generation that fought racial oppression through the civil rights movement, and his words inspire us today as we continue the fight for racial equality that is sadly yet to be won. The Reverend Dr. King believed in his dream so deeply, he paid for it with his life. Today, we honor his sacrifice by revisiting his legacy of peace and love and reflecting his words in the way we treat one another. More than 5 decades have passed since Dr. King was assassinated, and we may be tempted to despair that his cherished dream of a country where all men are created equal will never come true. But Dr. King taught us that there is always hope, and I do have hope that America will someday be a place where health disparities are eradicated, where everyone is treated equally under law regardless of their skin color, and where opportunities to learn and prosper are available to all. I want to thank all of you for taking part in this special program today. Together, we can make Dr. King's dream a reality.
Marilyn Kelly is the distinguished jurist and resident at the Wayne State University Law School where she teaches. She is the former Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court where she served for 16 years. Wayne State is privileged to have her serve as the chair of the Board of Governors.
Good morning. I'm Marilyn Kelly, Chair of the Board of Governors, and on behalf of the board, I welcome you to the university's Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. Wayne State is and long has been a university of diverse people and ideas, so it's fitting that with today's program, we reflect on Dr. King and on his many successes in leading people to understanding and accepting diversity. There was a time when the words inscribed in our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, rang hollow for far too many. Then, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. emerged to lead our country, to guide us through the civil rights movement toward a more perfect union where all people, regardless of race, might enjoy equally the rights and protections of the United States Constitution. Today, we struggle with the painful truth that the battle for equality is not yet won. Institutional racism, unequal treatment under law, and disparities in health care are no strangers in America. And for that reason, it's critically important that we take a moment now to celebrate Dr. King, to remember what he paid the ultimate price for, and to appreciate him for breathing new life into the quest for equality and justice for all. Our thanks to you for joining us for today's commemorative program. I hope it inspires you to do your part in making our university, our city, and our world the better places Dr. King dreamed of and worked so diligently to build.
Michigan's Gary Peters is recognized as one of the most effective senators in Congress. He is a graduate of Wayne State University's Law School and will deliver a special reflection honoring Dr. King.
Hello, I'm U.S. Senator Gary Peters, and today we commemorate the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the activism he inspired and the world he shaped for future generations. We have endured unprecedented challenges over the past 2 years, from economic hardships to social and political polarization. But we can never lose sight of the dream that Dr. King instilled in us all. He said we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Together, we can create the world built from justice and righteousness that Dr. King dreamed of, where unarmed truth prevails and love triumphs hate. We cannot let setbacks and challenges derail us from making Dr. King's dream a reality for families all across Michigan and our country. And we cannot allow the very bedrock of our democracy, the right to vote, to erode before our eyes. We must safeguard our democracy against efforts that are seeking to undermine access to the ballot box. When Dr. King shouted from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, "Give us the ballot," he knew how the power of voting could make meaningful, positive change. And that's why passing voting rights legislation into law, including the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, is absolutely vital for protecting every American's right to make their voices heard.
Rocket Companies is the title sponsor of Wayne State University's annual tribute to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Representing Rocket Companies is Trina Scott, Chief Diversity Officer.
Good morning. My name is Trina Scott, and I am the Chief Diversity Officer for Rocket Companies. It's an honor to be a part of the annual Wayne State tribute to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We want to congratulate all the awardees for all of their efforts they continue to have in the communities that we work, live, and play in. As we all know, Dr. King's legacy is about impacting the lives and fighting for equality. In 1954, at Second Baptist Church, where he delivered the speech entitled Rediscovering Lost Values, Dr. King stated, "We know more today than any other time in history, and that holds true in 2022. The theme of looking back to going forward is so paramount in the times that we are living in now. As we acknowledge the past, we are able to plan for a better future. At Rocket Companies, I'm proud to say that we are committed to the city of Detroit, specifically closing the racial homeownership gap. We do this by lifting up our community members through various education, employment, and housing program initiatives that our team members and community partners help to develop and implement. Rocket Companies is powered by passion and driven by our team members who build and sustain an environment that values diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our more than 20,000 team members right here in Detroit promote equality and equity for our communities and value the diverse voices throughout the cities we call home. Our team members and their voices are at the core of our community work. We believe a healthy business community contributes to a healthy economy. In 2021, the Gilbert Family Foundation announced its commitment of $500 million that is focused on building opportunity and equity for Detroit residents over the next 10 years. These initiatives illustrate a few examples of Rocket Companies' partnership with the community towards a more equitable future. Thank you, Wayne State, for allowing Rocket Companies to be a part of this historical celebration. We will continue to work with community stakeholders, residents, students, and entrepreneurs to impact the outcome. Thank you.
We have several outstanding Wayne State alumni on our program today, such as our next speaker. Reginald Turner is a native Detroiter and accomplished attorney. He is a former member of the Detroit School Board and the Michigan Board of Education. Additionally, Mr. Turner is the past president of the National Bar Association and the State Bar of Michigan. He served as the chair of the American Bar Association's Commission on Racial and Ethnic Diversity in the Profession. This Wayne State Law School graduate is now the president of the American Bar Association. Reginald Turner will share with us his reflection on Dr. King.
As a lawyer and as president of the American Bar Association, I'm struck by Martin Luther King's steadfast commitment to justice. Dr. King, as a member of the clergy, answered a calling to which my colleagues in the legal profession aspire every day. Lawyers swear to uphold the United States Constitution with the goal of we the people to establish justice. Inscribed above the marble pillars of our nation's Supreme Court is the motto, equal justice under law. As lawyers, we aim to deliver justice for our clients. The Reverend King reminded us that justice is not just a slogan or a bullet point in a lawyer's job description. It is much broader, much deeper, and much more sacred. Drawing on scripture, he urged us all, whatever our calling, to strive for the day when justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. He prophesied that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. From the stark clarity of his jail cell in Birmingham, Martin Luther King saw that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This is our charge, our calling as God's children today and every day. Justice, justice, justice you shall pursue. As a Black lawyer, I understand that who I am and what I have been able to accomplish is a product of Dr. King's fight for justice and equality, an honor for which I am grateful and carry in my heart.
Since 1995, Inside Out Literary Arts has helped over 65,000 of Detroit's youth build their literary and academic skills through creative writing. In recognition of its ability to foster and empower authentic youth voices, the White House awarded Inside Out the highest honor in youth arts programming, the National Arts and Humanities Youth Program Award, which was presented by Michelle Obama in 2009. Inside and Out Literary Arts has been a part of this annual tribute for many years. Representing them today is Ife Martin with the poem she wrote.
We all want to be better than our mothers and fathers, our sisters and brothers, than our best friends and worst enemies. We're told that better looks like our name in lights. It sounds like the roar of an audience, the praise of the public. It's warm on our skin like a kiss from the sun. We're told that victory tastes sweet. The word melts on our tongue best. I'm not the best. Sometimes I stumble over my words. Sometimes my pen spends hours scribbling on a page only to arrive at nothing. Sometimes I lose. A lot of the time, I lose. I stumble from the pedestal I long to call my home. I scrape my knees and rip my clothes on jagged rock shaped like failure, falling into the darkness of uncertainty. But when you fall, you once again discover what the ground feels like. The rich soil wrapped around your roots, a strength defined by your resilience. You remember why you wanted to grow in the first place. Your head's no longer in the clouds, so you know the sky is not the limit. It's just a resting point. You're no longer looking back at what you've done, but forward at what you can do. Because best isn't a flickering marquee or wavering applause. It's not a scorching sun or rotting sweetness. It's not a place defined by others. But it's the point at which your eyes land. Being the best, being better, being great is what you make it.
That was wonderful, Ife. Thank you for sharing your talents with us and honoring Dr. King. Next, Zania Alake will give another musical performance.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. I go to the movies and I go downtown. Somebody keeps telling me, don't you hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother say, brother, help me please. But he just winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, there are times when I thought I wouldn't last for long. Now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long, 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 long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will. Oh, a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. A change is gonna come. Oh, a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. A change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. A change is gonna come. A change is gonna come.
Thank you again, Zania. That was beautiful. You really should have won the voice. You know, Dr. Arthur Johnson was a Morehouse College classmate of Dr. King's and began the annual Wayne State Tribute to honor him. Dr. Johnson, a former senior vice president of Wayne State University, was a remarkable civil rights and community leader, educator, and administrator. The Dr. L. Johnson Community Leadership Awards honor an individual and an organization exemplifying Dr. Johnson's commitment to community and making a positive difference in Detroit and beyond. Once again, we are thankful that AARP of Michigan is the presenting sponsor of these awards, and AARP State Director Paula Cunningham, a distinguished community, business, and educational leader, and AARP State Director, is once again lending her support. Let's take time now to honor Dr. Johnson and find out who this year's recipients are.
Dr. Arthur L. Johnson was a civil rights pioneer, human rights advocate, educator, scholar, and ultimately a champion of justice. He retired as Senior Vice President of Wayne State University in 1995 after serving 23 years in various high-ranking positions. Embodying a fierce but quiet courage, Dr. Johnson was perhaps greater known as a freedom fighter in the battle to end racial segregation and discrimination in neighborhoods, businesses, restaurants, hospitals, banks, and other institutions throughout Detroit. In 1948, he graduated from Morehouse College alongside his classmate and close friend, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And like Dr. King, Art Johnson grew into an extraordinary individual whose legacy both endows and inspires all our efforts to create unity and a better city. After being recruited to Detroit in 1950 by the NAACP to serve as the National Executive Secretary, Dr. Johnson served in this capacity from 1950 to 1964. Longtime friend Judge Damon J. Keith said, Art rose from poverty to prominence largely on the strength of his intellect, integrity, determination, and compassion for all people. He was a man of absolute integrity, loyalty, and commitment to this city and community. The Arthur L. Johnson Community Leadership Awards recognizes individuals and organizations that embody the same passion and desires that Dr. Johnson lived by, to invest in the community and in the lives of others. He will be forever remembered as a champion of justice.
Jamita Lilly is CEO of the Detroit Parent Network, the leading multi-generational parent engagement organization in the state of Michigan. She has also been at the forefront of supporting Detroit communities during the COVID-19 pandemic and is a member of the Michigan Coronavirus Task Force on Racial Disparities.
One of the things I always ask is, how can I be of service? So it was clearly providential how I ended up at the Detroit Parent Network. But being at the Detroit Parent Network is a continuation of really what I was raised in. So I am the proud daughter of two Black folks who came from families that believed in service, who believed in education as being fundamental. And all of that helped me to grow up understanding the historic nature of racism, sexism, and ethnocentrism that this country has. And also, having lived overseas, we were constantly exposed to different races and ethnic groups and nationalities around our dinner table. So that was one of the blessings that I think I got very early, was the ability to work with different types of people and hear their story. By the same token, have my own story, I had my own voice to tell. So by the time I came to Detroit Parent Network, I've had the privilege of over 30 years of working in different systems. That kind of diversity of experiences has given me a sense of an appreciation for the complexity of change and the fact that there are no simple answers when it comes to empowering and creating equity in society. But we can't do it if we act like the inequities and the racism and the sexism doesn't exist. So in order for children to thrive, we have to look at them as a whole child. We have to look at their health. We have to look at their education. We have to look at their food. We have to look at the environment, the housing, the family that they grow up in. So no matter what my positions were, being a fierce advocate for parents as the first teacher, and that we must have an equitable distribution of economic wealth and opportunity is critical. Thank you, and I am so profoundly humbled and honored to receive this award, because certainly I have tried to live my values and that edict of being of service and to be a change agent. But I stand on the shoulders as a Black woman of an audacious group of ancestors, including my father, Professor James Boyce, my mother, Larita, and a bevy of entrepreneurial and caring generations of families. And I'm lovingly supported by a wonderful and brilliant husband, Leon Lilly, and my family. But I'm here to amplify the message that we have today. And that is when we think about our theme, looking back to look ahead, that essentially is Sankofa. The Akan people of Ghana remind us that in order for us to carve the future that we need, we must go back to the past and fetch it. So I submit that at this point in our nation, perhaps ever before, no more than now with COVID and all the hatred that's being stoked, that we must hit pause. We must pray, reflect, think, look at all of our past and use that to inform the future that we want for our children. A future that is peaceful, that is just, that is organized around the principles of equity. And I believe that we can help this city, our nation, and then our world to bloom. That's my dream.
The Michigan Justice Fund was established to address racial disparities across the criminal legal system. It is a collaborative fund committed to promoting and advancing the prosperity and dignity of Michigan's residents by stemming the flow of individuals into the youth and criminal justice systems, supporting the investment of public dollars to community-driven alternatives to incarceration and detention, and by ensuring those who are returning home after incarceration or detention receive the support they need to flourish.
The Michigan Justice Fund is a collaborative of both local and national philanthropic organizations that add to a fund that can be used here in Michigan to support both policy and practice as it's related to criminal legal reform in the state of Michigan.
At this point, we have 14 funders that are contributing to the fund and are partners in our strategy, as well as partner advisors. And one of our partner advisors is Wayne State University's Center for Behavioral Health and Justice. They've shown true leadership in this area, and we're so grateful to have them at our table. We've raised $18 million to date and launched our fund with our first round of grant making in 2021.
Michigan Justice Fund absolutely deserves this acknowledgement. They are leaders in power building and has really supported our mission since its founding. They didn't just invite us to the table, they invited us as a partner to set the table. They ask us questions like, how can funders show up as allies, which is incredibly rare and important.
I think that this is an incredible time for not only the city of Detroit and Wayne County for criminal legal reform, but also the state. And I am so very excited that the Michigan Justice Fund can support this work.
It's a great honor to be awarded the Arthur L. Johnson Award, given his leadership in this community. It is wonderful to see institutions like Wayne State University celebrate our heroes and our sheroes, and such an honor just to inherit that legacy and try to achieve equity, which I know he was so fundamentally interested in.
On behalf of the Michigan Justice Fund, I want to thank the Wayne State University for this incredible honor. We are excited for the important partnerships that we have developed with the Wayne State community and look forward to continued collaboration as we work to address systemic issues across the criminal legal system in Michigan. We strive to continue embodying the positive efforts demonstrated by Dr. Johnson and his enduring legacy. Thank you again.
Congratulations to Jametta Lilly and the Michigan Justice Fund. It is my honor to present this next special recognition that builds upon Dr. Johnson's dedication to community service. The very first Warrior Strong Distinguished Service Award is given to Wayne State University graduate and former Detroit City Council President Brenda Jones. She retired on December 31st after 16 years of public service on the Detroit City Council. During her time on council, Brenda participated in over 700 council formal sessions, almost 130 evening and community meetings, and countless standing committees, closed sessions, town halls, and hours of meetings with a variety of constituents. She attended numerous community meetings, police and fire graduations, church services, and board meetings. President Jones also chaired the Skilled Trades Task Force and the Veterans and Military Affairs Task Force. She hosted an annual Senior Resource Summit, a Taste of Detroit holiday party, a Thanksgiving turkey giveaway, and awarded over $12 million in scholarships through the Detroit Infinite Scholars College Fair. Wayne State's website says this about Warrior Strong. Sometimes all we have is the strength inside, the kind of strength that keeps you moving forward when you'd rather turn back, the strength to do the right thing when it's easier to do nothing at all, to do good and then ask, how can I do better? The strength to never settle for the way things are, but strive for the way things ought to be, and to know that to get where you want to go, you might have to make your own path. This is what Brenda Jones has done as she humbly served the people of Detroit for 16 years. Wayne State is very proud of this warrior.
Thank you. I am deeply honored to be the first person to receive the Wayne State University Warrior Strong Distinguished Service Award. I would like to first begin by thanking God, who has given me the strength, the stamina, good health, and opportunity to serve in the Detroit City Council for 16 years. And for half of those years, I served as council president. During this time, I tried every day to represent the city of Detroit and its residents with courage, dignity, and respect. I sought to exchange the quality of life for all Detroiters through my vision that focused on Jones. J for jobs, O for opportunities, N for neighborhoods, E for education, and S for safety. I know it was only God
that got me through. This has not been an easy experience. Every decision that I made, every vote that I have taken, I have done it with great care, love, and most of all, the grace of God. Thank you to my former colleagues, our council staff, the city administration, the city clerk, and most importantly, the residents of Detroit. Lastly, I must give a special thanks to my staff. We did some amazing work, and there will never be another Team Jones. May God continue to bless Wayne State University, my alumni, the city of Detroit, the state of Michigan, and the United States of America as we move forward together. God bless.
Okay, now for the moment we've been anticipating. Christopher Wilson earned a master's degree in public history at Wayne State and is a leading public historian of the civil rights movement and a visionary museum director. He has led the development of innovative programming on African American history at the Smithsonian Institution since 2004. Currently, he is the Director of Experience Design at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History. Prior to this, Christopher presented, planned, and supervised public programs and exhibitions for 18 years at the Henry Ford in Dearborn, Michigan. While there, he oversaw a multi-year Harlem Renaissance project in collaboration with the Arts League of Michigan. Christopher has made a career of making history come to life. From his student sit-ins at the lunch counter of a Woolworths in Greensboro to the Negro Baseball League, Christopher has made important moments in history, and particularly African American history, experiences that we can all learn from. In 2021, Wayne State University honored Christopher's achievements with the Distinguished Alumni Award, conferred by the president of the university. This award recognizes individuals who have made a distinct impact in their field and serve as role models. Christopher is the son of 2 Wayne State graduates. He is also a graduate of U of D Jesuit High School, and I know there are current students watching today's program.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, distinguished members of the Wayne State and Detroit communities, the Alumni Association, and Wayne State students and faculty. It is such an honor to speak with you today and to have been chosen to deliver remarks on the occasion of the birthday and the national holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I wish I could be there in person with you all today on the campus in Detroit to celebrate and enter into community with you. I hope you all take the best of care of yourselves and others as we continue to navigate this public health crisis we all face and we are all working on together to overcome. As we all know, this nation has experienced other such crises through its history. Of course, the flu pandemic of 100 years ago was one, but today it's appropriate to consider an even more pernicious disease that threatens the nation. I've always felt a certain connection to the work and words of Dr. King from the last couple years of his life. Those were the years that I shared this earth with him. I'm not old enough to remember those years, but I've always gone back to his words then because this was history that was happening while I was alive. Dr. King said these words throughout his public life, but more forcefully and publicly in 1967 and 68. He said the nation was sick. Confusion was all around. That disease that we combated then and we still combat now was racism. Dr. King said Americans are infected by racism. The infirmity racism caused, he said, was a sickness unto death and a disease that could destroy our nation. This is not often the king we meet on his holiday. We meet a more hopeful king, an inspiring king, a comfortable king. As a historian, as someone who has worked in public history at 2 of the nation's biggest history museums for the last 35 years, I want to talk to you a bit about history and memory, and how a fuller history and a more complicated history can help honor the life and work of Dr. King. I've had the great opportunity to work with some of the most iconic artifacts of the civil rights movement, which now have homes in our museums. When I lived in Detroit, I was involved in the collection and the exhibition of the Rosa Parks bus at the Henry Ford Museum. And at the Smithsonian, I've been honored to work with the lunch counter from the F.W. Woolworth store in Greensboro, North Carolina, where on February 1st, 1960, 4 Black men sat down, asked to be served, and inspired thousands of others to put their bodies on the line to force this nation to change for the better. Those are great moments to celebrate with exhibits and artifacts at museums. But there's something that happens when something like the lunch counter becomes a part of the national collection at the Smithsonian. It's the same thing, I think, that happens when we erect a statue to a historical figure or name a school or a street after someone in the past. It's the same thing that happens when history becomes a holiday like Juneteenth or Martin Luther King Day. When that happens, history becomes myth. History becomes memory. History and memory or myth or nostalgia are not the same things. History is the search for knowledge about the past based on evidence. History is always very complicated and does not lead to easy morals or lessons. It generally does not make you feel comfortable. Nostalgia is a story we tell ourselves about the past, sometimes with no evidence at all, and usually in order to make ourselves feel comfortable. Memory is simple. It is a simple story that is often filled with lessons and morals, but that reflects or rejects the complexity of real history. I always think of Chuck D's line in Fight the Power by Public Enemy when he said, "Most of my heroes don't appear on those stamps." Well, what happens when our heroes are on stamps? When something like the Greensboro 4, the Greensboro lunch counter, or the Rosa Parks bus enters a museum, or a holiday is created for Martin Luther King, or for the forced end of slavery in Texas on Juneteenth, those stories tend to lose their complexity and their controversy. As we celebrate these icons or symbols of this history, they become less radical, less complicated, less real, and more accepted, but in an artificial way. We greet those stories with, of course the Greensboro 4 did the right thing. Of course I'd have supported Rosa Parks and the boycott of the buses in Montgomery. Of course I'd admire and follow Dr. King. Indeed, today, nearly everyone says they admire Martin Luther King. In 2019, more than 90% of US adults in a poll said they viewed him favorably. It wasn't just King, but others like Rosa Parks at 88%, and even Muhammad Ali at 77% were viewed in a positive light. Among social movements in American history, the overall civil rights movement attained the highest proportion of Americans at 70%, saying that it had made the country better, a perception that was held equally among Blacks and whites. But polls and surveys during the 1950s and 60s show most Americans felt very differently about the movement and its leaders. Americans were skeptical of King and the nonviolent movement early in the 1960s. A Gallup poll during the 1961 Freedom Rides, an effort to test whether the Supreme Court ruling outlawing segregation in interstate transit would be enforced by the Kennedy administration, rather than allowing lawless Southern states to violate the Constitution, showed that 61% of Americans disapproved of this nonviolent protest. A similar number, 57%, felt the tactics like sit-ins would ultimately hurt the cause of Blacks in their drive to end segregation. Dr. King fared fairly well in a poll just before the March on Washington in 1963, when 71% of respondents felt like he was moving at just the right speed for equal rights rather than too fast or too slow. Interestingly, as the movement picked up pace, the popularity and the acceptance of his nonviolent campaign for equality and the leaders, including Dr. King himself, began to plummet. By 1966, a Harris poll showed 85% of Americans felt civil rights demonstrations were hurting the cause of equality, while a Gallup poll the same year showed Americans were twice as likely to have a negative as a positive opinion of Dr. King. In fact, one of the programs I run at the Smithsonian is our History Film Forum, where we explore film as a way of interpreting and presenting history. Last year, I had the great opportunity to talk with the celebrated and influential director, Sam Pollard, about his film MLK FBI, which chronicled the government's campaign to destroy Dr. King. Far from seeing him as a marble model of a great American, the government labeled him and all Black activists as threats to democracy and the nation, and they sought to destroy him, going so far as to surveil him and send recordings of his infidelities to his wife and friends in an attempt to get him to kill himself. And the reason he was so dangerous was from the beginning, he and others in the movement were about destroying systemic racism. It wasn't just that they felt that segregation was mean. It was that segregation was a system intended to keep Black people in a servile condition. So why do we turn our complicated history into myths, into simple myths? Perhaps we do this because we think inspirational stories have to be simple, turning flawed, frightened human people into shadows of what they were. Perhaps we feel like we can't be inspired by someone who was flawed or imperfect. But that's not true. And the civil rights movement is a great example of why that's not true. Let's look at a couple of examples. I left Detroit and came to the Smithsonian in 2004 to run the African American History program at the American History Museum. That program was started some 30 years ago by Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan, activist, scholar, and artist, and the founder of the Black women's a cappella singing group Sweet Honey in the Rock. She had the idea to present the civil rights movement as a people's story. She started the Smithsonian's national celebration of Martin Luther King's birthday even before there was a federal holiday, despite the fact that we as a nation weren't celebrating him when we should have been. Dr. Regan decided that the Smithsonian's program celebrating King wouldn't even mention him because it would be about others with living memory of the movement. Why? Because this movement was not just a story of the leaders or the people who went first. Now, we need the courage of leaders like King and Rosa Parks and many others, people who were willing to wade in and make a change. People who go first and go alone are special. They might have gotten arrested, beaten up, maybe killed. But we also needed the commitment of people to follow them and make that moment of courage into a movement. Plenty of people had resisted segregation just like Rosa Parks did that famous day in December 1955. Teenager Claudette Colvin earlier in 1955. Sarah Keyes in 1953, Irene Morgan in 1944, or Viola White the same year. Viola refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery and bravely decided to challenge her case in court. When she did, to terrorize her into dropping the case, the police kidnapped her 16-year-old daughter, drove her out to a cemetery, and raped her. The Black freedom struggle needed that initial bravery, but then they needed something more in the face of such racist terrorism. It needed thousands of foot soldiers who would take that risk to try to destroy the systems that propped up racism. Over the past 20 years, I've gotten to know a number of the most influential veterans of the movement very well. One of my favorite people is Diane Nash. Diane lives in Chicago and remains someone I consider a founder not just of the movement, but of the nation. She was involved in so many parts of the movement. You should really learn her story. And what Diane has always said is, if you remember the movement just as the exploits of amazing leaders, after whom streets are named and statues are erected, when you encounter problems today, you'll say, I wish we had someone to lead us. But if you think of it as it was, as a people's movement, you'll think, what can I do? What is the answer to what can I do? Ordinary people can do a lot, but only when we're working together. I'm sure when Wayne students look at the world today, you see problems and you get angry. You get confused and depressed. You don't know what to do or feel like you can't do anything. You should realize that every civil rights person whose name is or isn't in a history book, who I've met, has told me that that's where their inspiration came from. Diane Nash was angry at Fisk University when she first came down to the South and experienced racism that was in her face. The Greensboro Four, who sat at that lunch counter, said this started with anger, to the point that Frank McCain, in his early teens, said he felt suicidal because of the dehumanizing effects of segregation. I had the great opportunity when I worked at Henry Ford Museum to spend a long time with Rosa Parks. I got to drive her around Greenfield Village in an old station wagon and visit the buildings and the exhibits there that related to African American history. Mrs. Parks didn't come off to me as the quiet, meek Mother Rosa that we often hear about in history books and in stories. But she came across as an angry woman. She looked around Detroit then in the 1990s, and she was angry. All of these people that I met were often discouraged and depressed. Parks went to the Highlander Folk School and came out of it thinking, all of this training in nonviolence is nice, but there's no way anything is going to come of it. Diane Nash went to Jim Lawson's training school, which eventually changed her life, but before that, she thought there was no way nonviolent direct action was going to work. A lot of people learned about nonviolence and Gandhi and so forth, but had a hard time really believing in it or embracing it, especially as a tactic. And they had reason to be angry. The situation in Montgomery and the situation all over the country, including here in Detroit, was really bad, really frightening, and really dangerous to try to resist. But despite being angry and skeptical, people eventually found that nonviolent direct action could be empowering. And I never quite understood how that empowerment worked until something Diane Nash once told me. The moment she really accepted nonviolence was when she realized that because of nonviolence, as soon as she decided she wouldn't be segregated anymore, segregation was over. Before any laws were passed or the Constitution was amended, she decided, I am not going to submit. You can jail me, you can beat me, you can kill me, but you can't segregate me anymore because I won't be segregated. It was a freeing moment for her and for many others. The biggest change that the movement made was the change within people themselves. There were amazing changes to our laws and society, but there were bigger changes in people deciding what they could do and that they had power. That's the challenge to learn from this generation that is rapidly fading away from us. They showed that they could change themselves by commitment to the cause. How can you change yourselves? How can you find within yourselves today the same sort of internal fortitude and empowerment to move forward and change this world into the world that you want yourselves, your children, and your grandchildren to inherit? One way is to get to meet these people, the real version of these people. The MLK holiday is not, to me, about a day of service. It's not about a few comfortable lines in a few of his speeches. It's not about a group hug. It's about a day of action. One action you can take is to go back to our history and embrace it in all its complexity. Read Dr. King's first book, Stride Toward Freedom. Listen to any of his speeches and sermons that are lesser known and collected at Stanford and elsewhere. Or look right here at Wayne State. Go to the archives and find the oral history of Wayne State professor Walter Bergman, who participated in the Freedom Rides. Explore the papers of Wayne State Medical School physician Silas Norman, who was instrumental in the voting rights campaign at Selma. Meet the people in Detroit who are still living and still have stories to tell and stories we need to hear. I believe this history can empower us to make a better future, but only if we engage it in its fullest sense and accept that truth must go deeper than what we can understand from a statue, a street name, or a holiday. Thank you so much for allowing me to spend this time with you today. I wish you a blessed and an active Martin Luther King holiday. Thank you.
Christopher, thank you for that wonderful keynote address, my man. You really make history come alive, and you inspire us all with the work that you're doing there at the Smithsonian. As we look at Martin Luther King holiday this year, one of the things that we tend to find are people are misusing his message and his quotes and taking them out of context. How do we keep the message that he left us on point and relevant to today?
Well, I think what we have to do is really look deeply at what his real message was. I think we often look for history that can make us comfortable. So we look for a comfortable king. You know, we look for a message that we can all agree with. And in some ways, there's nothing wrong with some of the messages that we do take away from King. But the problem is, I think we boil down his whole life and really the civil rights movement into this idea of you should judge someone by the content of their character and not the color of their skin, which of course there's nothing wrong with that. And of course that's what we should do, but there's so much more going on. And if we think of just this idea of creating a colorblind society, which of course we haven't even created yet, as the message, then I think we're missing so much of the radical nature of Dr. King. I think it's telling that we have kind of turned the King holiday into this idea of a day of service. Now, there's nothing wrong with service and there's nothing wrong with messages of love and so forth. Growing up in Detroit, I went to Jesuit high school and Jesuit grade school, Jesu and University of Detroit Jesuit High School. When I was at Wayne, I helped out at a soup kitchen right there on Warren. So I've always felt like service was really important and love was really important. But really what Dr. King was about was a radical remaking of society. And we've conveniently forgotten in our history much of that story. And, you know, during his life, King, now we've again found a king that we can all agree with and we can make a holiday about. But even at the end of his life, America was really divided by King because of the messages that he was saying, and because he was really holding our feet to the fire as a nation to really rise up and live out the true meaning of our creed.
Yeah, it's really fascinating when you put it like that, and how we try and find a comfortable space to be in when it comes to his messaging. In fact, I had started the Grosse Pointe Harper Woods NAACP, and one of the first things that we had done was honor King's visit to Grosse Pointe South High School, where he gave his To America speech. That was right before he went down to Memphis and was assassinated. But Dr. King's connection to Detroit is pretty strong, and the march down Woodward that he had and the activism that he had engaged in, particularly as it relates to the labor movement. How does Dr. King's messages of economic equity, as it were, and labor unions and things of that nature fit in with the way that we kind of remember him today, or don't remember him?
Well, I think the last thing you said there is really the case. I think we just don't remember so much of that. You know, when King came to Detroit and participated in the Walk for Freedom and really tested out what would become his most famous speech, the "I Have a Dream" speech, tested out in Detroit. The reason and the occasion on which he was there in June of 1963 was because of the 20th anniversary of the 1943 riot in Detroit, where white supremacists had attacked blacks all over the city, starting at Belle Isle, and the leaders of Detroit really wanted to, black leaders of Detroit really wanted to bring him here to talk not just about what was going on in the South, but the issues with housing discrimination and police brutality and so forth right here in Detroit. And that had been an issue that was that had been in a situation for years and years in Detroit, and really was fueling many people becoming active in and trying to change the situation here in Detroit. So it was a great opportunity for him to present that speech. But just like we don't really remember the full speech at the March on Washington, which of course has that wonderful language about being free at last, and the dream that he has for America, where we won't be a nation that's judging people by the color of their skin. It also, both speeches also started with the idea that America owed a debt to its inhabitants of color that hadn't paid yet, and we were coming in en masse, but peacefully, to demand payment on that check.
It's interesting that you talk about it, the inheritance that's owned, because reparations has been a conversation that has, started up in the last little while. I'm curious, with the work that you have done in bringing history to life, Black history to life, making it relevant to people, some of the pushback that we see in the world as it relates to even having discussions about critical race theory and making it seem as if it's being taught to kindergartners. It just seems like that there is some pushback in relationship to our history. Do you find that makes the work that you do more difficult?
I think I've spent my career over now 35 years in public history, working in spaces that were somewhat uncomfortable, for people, and I think that, as I said before, we often use history as a way to make ourselves feel more comfortable. And oftentimes we think of museums, visitors think of museums and history as a place where we can go back and come away with inspiration from stories that are very clear cut and have great morals and are completely understandable and relatable by everyone. When you really look at it as a historian, though, history is much more complicated than that. History doesn't lead to definite conclusions, doesn't lead to everyone feeling comfortable or taking away the same lessons from the past. So what I've felt that was really important was to use the status of wonderful institutions like Henry Ford Museum, where I used to work, and now the Smithsonian Institution, that are such trusted organizations where we can bring people together and hopefully find some common ground and at least some respect for one another.
Some people may not know of Dr. King's impact on Detroit, from his work with labor unions to Dr. Johnson, to his walk to freedom down Woodward, to his first I Have a Dream speech in Cobo Arena on June 23rd, 1963. As a young man growing up in Detroit, did Dr. King's legacy impact your interest in history, especially African American history?
I guess I grew up in Detroit in a family where history was really valued. So my parents, both my sets of grandparents, grew up on the east side from the early 20th century on, and always valued, and always helped me to kind of understand where we sat in Detroit history and in national history. I always loved going around with my dad, who worked in Detroit Parks and Rec, and going to different parts of the city and seeing, and he would tell me about the changes. So they moved into an area on Dexter and Davison area that had been a Jewish neighborhood previously. They were some of the first Black people to buy a house in that area. And of course, that was an area that was changing and really challenged for the time when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s. And but they always would tell me the story of that neighborhood and the story of their neighborhoods growing up. And so history was really always important to me. and civil rights history as well. I felt really connected to Dr. King and to other members of the movement because I met some of them growing up, and because my parents would let me know, you were alive during King's life. I feel like I shared a little bit of time on this earth with him. Also, I was born during the uprising of 1967, and so I was always fascinated with not just that story and what my parents went through during that time, but also where it came from and the reaction against police brutality that happened there that caused a lot of it. And so I remember even in high school starting to research and actually spending time down at the Detroit Public Library main branch and looking at newspapers during high school for a paper I was doing about what it was like just before I was born, and seeing in the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press these depictions of and stories of police brutality that were written up in such a cold and callous way, and knowing that that's what my parents and grandparents had to grow up with, and knowing that's what sparked that uprising that was happening literally the time that my mother was 9 months pregnant with me, and I was being born. So I was always very interested in kind of where I came from and how Detroit history was related to it.
Do you think that we will ever get to the point where we can be comfortable with the uncomfortable truths about history?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think that it continues to be a challenge. A year and a half ago, after George Floyd was murdered, and we really surprisingly to me started looking at how history affects those, how we think about today, and started revising that thinking. And everyone seemed very comfortable talking about this history of white supremacy and racial violence that has animated United States history since the beginning. Well, then a year later, we start seeing a backlash to that, and start seeing people saying, as opposed to being comfortable with talking about it, saying it should be illegal to talk about it. So obviously we aren't there yet, and but I'm hoping that that as time goes by, we get more and more comfortable with at least talking about it. And again, I think my work as a public historian has really been about helping people be comfortable with complexity and comfortable with an uncomfortable space.
Christopher, you founded the award-winning National Youth Summit that convenes thousands of middle and high school students nationally and internationally around a historical topic with relevance for young people today. What direct actions can today's young people take to advance Dr. King's legacy and, this is your quote, participate in the radical, peaceful revolution to transform America into a nation that lives up to its ideals?
Right, our National Youth Summit at the Smithsonian. When I started out at the Smithsonian, really studying the civil rights movement, my predecessors running that program, starting with Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan, member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee's Freedom Singers, and then later a scholar at the Smithsonian and the founder of the African American a cappella women's singing group Sweet Honey in the Rock, had started our African American program at the Smithsonian and our Martin Luther King commemoration program. And I wanted and had really looked at how we would remember that movement through people with living memory of the civil rights movement. I continued that work when I got there, but one of the things I wanted to do differently was to bring in more young people to that educational journey, and to really use the Smithsonian's convening power to bring together as many high school age students across the country and world as we could on one particular day to talk about history that still had relevance today. And so that's what we started with about 12 years ago now, and that has continued. And my colleagues at the Smithsonian have carried that forward, and they just finished a really wonderful National Youth Summit on gender equity this past year. So I'm really happy that that has continued. And again, that idea of bringing together the youth in conversation, people that don't know each other from all over the country and again, world, we've been able to bring in students from places as far away as Africa, Iceland, and others to talk about these issues that are not just American issues, but are worldwide issues.
Last question. In addition to your day job at the Smithsonian, you've been an instructor at Harvard University's Extension School. You serve on Wayne State's advisory board for the graduate program in public history. You are a prolific writer of blogs, articles, plays, and a sought-after panelist on various platforms. When do you sleep? I mean, seriously, if someone wants to read your work or just learn more about and from you, how would they do it?
Well, I write a lot for Smithsonian Magazine, and you can find that at smithsonianmagazine.com. And if you Google me, you'll find a number of those writings, as well as we've had several programs with other entities where one project called What It Means to Be American, and a lot of my writing has ended up there. In addition, I run a project called the History Film Forum, where we use film. We look at how film has interpreted history, and to what degree movies are good history teachers. And many of those programs are available on YouTube, as well as through historyfilmforum.si.edu.
That is awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing those things and reading more of your work and keeping up with you. Thank you so much for all that you do for us. And we miss you in Detroit, man. We can't wait for you to come on home.
Thank you so much.
Greetings to everyone who has joined us for this phenomenal program celebrating the life of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I am fortunate to have been alive when Dr. King walked the earth. And while I was never blessed to see him in person, I have vivid memories of the events following his death in April 1968. My father, who had been active in the civil rights movement in our city, was called upon to help quiet the turmoil that immediately followed King's assassination. He and other officials planned a march to commemorate the life and death of Dr. King. I recall marching with my family and members of our community, our arms linked together and singing, "We shall overcome someday." It was a moment in time that I will not forget. We have all been touched in some way by the words and legacy of Dr. King. Dr. King said, "I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word." It is in the spirit of unconditional love that I invite all of you to join me and members of the Wayne State community for an event that continues the celebration of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. On Tuesday, January 18th, 2022, we will celebrate the 6th annual National Day of Healing from Racism, a campus-wide day-long virtual event held in collaboration with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation's National Day of Racial Healing. This year, as in years past, we will offer a variety of activities throughout the day that will offer numerous opportunities for dialogue, reflection, and connection. Through art, a theater performance, meditation, workshops, and other activities, we will engage in experiences that will help us begin to heal from the impacts of racism in our lives. You can find out more about this event by visiting the website events.wayne.edu and searching for the National Day of Healing from Racism 2022. I look forward to seeing you there.
On behalf of Wayne State University, I want to thank each of you in the viewing audience for joining us today and watching our program. I also want to thank our keynote speaker and 2021 Distinguished Warrior alumni, Christopher Wilson, on the fine job you did today with your informative and inspiring words. Thank you to Mr. Bowens for sharing your immense talents with us and hosting today's program. And a special thank you to all our sponsors that supported this program. Because of you, we're able to maintain Dr. Johnson's vision of producing a first-rate program. Thank you to all of the Wayne State team who made this tribute possible. University Television, Special Events, Marketing and Communications, Public Safety, and WDET. Of course, a special thank you to Stacy Clayton, Director of Community Affairs. For your information, this program will be rebroadcast on Monday, January 17th, the actual day of the observance of the King holiday. You can watch it at 10 a.m. on wayne.edu/live. You can watch it also at 2 p.m. on Comcast Channel 900 or at 8 p.m. also on Comcast Channel 900. Again, thank you for watching and have a peaceful and productive King holiday.